The Girl Scouts Canoe Trip. Chapter 11. In Quest of Peaches. When the Girl Scouts finished their ice cream, they sat for a few minutes in the little drugstore at Riker's, waiting for Ruth to return from her errand. "She certainly is a devoted daughter," remarked Alice, as she directed with a spluttering, overworked pen a souvenir postcard to her mother. "I never would think of sending a telegram." "Ruth's an only child," exclaimed Lily, "and it makes a difference, I can tell you." "But you didn't send your parents a telegram, Lil," put in Marjorie. "No, they're away, anyhow. But I do write often." Tired of waiting for Ruth, the girls started towards the inn and met her almost at the steps. They were glad of the opportunity to go to bed early, that they might make a good start in the morning. "And today's Thursday," remarked Miss Phillips, as they left the inn before 7 o'clock the following morning. "I think we ought to make it by Saturday night. I sent a postal announcing our arrival for then, anyhow." "And to whom did you announce it?" asked Ruth, hoping to catch her captain unaware and cause her to give away the secret, but Miss Phillips only smiled knowingly. "This is the earliest start we've had yet," she said. "But then we had no breakfast to cook or tents to take down. The girls paddled steadily all day. At last they came in sight of the big mill which Miss Phillips had designated as their camping spot. Ruth, however, was less interested in that than in the farm nearby. For sure enough, it was there, only instead of being opposite the mill, it was on the same side of the stream a little farther down. She had never confided to the other scouts the rumors that Michael had repeated about the woman who lived there. Indeed, she scarcely believed them herself, for she knew that gossiping people usually build stories about lonely, isolated lives. Nor had she any desire to frighten the girls. On the contrary, she wanted to get Marjorie and Frida, if possible, to visit the farm. She resolutely kept all her information to herself. Only Harold Mason shared her knowledge. Once she was sure of the farm, her next problem was how to get Marjorie there on some pretext. But she did not have to think hard. The difficulty practically solved itself. Before their very eyes, as they passed by, loomed a whole orchard of magnificent peaches, just about ripe. To the scouts, who had eaten little except dried fruit since they had left home, the display was most alluring, and Ruth lost no opportunity in mentioning them at every chance in order to make the girls' mouths water all the more. Accordingly, the next morning, soon after breakfast, she remarked, "I've simply got to have some of those peaches. Captain, couldn't Marge and I paddle back to the farmhouse and buy some for the rest of the trip? Our supplies aren't very heavy now, are they?" Miss Phillips considered it. It was Friday. Even if the weather continued favorable and conditions good, they could not reach their destination before Saturday night. So here were 2 days left to the journey, and the girls can eat a lot in 2 days. It was true, so, as Ruth said, that their baggage was light. So for all those reasons Miss Phillips gave her consent to Ruth's proposal, cautioning her, however, not to buy too many. "I'll give you $1 out of the fund," she said, "and you may buy as much as you can for that." Ruth and Marjorie jumped up in great glee and made haste to go and load their canoe. The others lingered a little. "We better go in the Will-o'-the-Wisp," said Ruth. "Doris, will you go with Lillian in the Water Witch?" "Certainly," replied the girl pleasantly. "Anything to get some of those peaches." "Don't wait for us to come back here," called Ruth. "We'll paddle on and meet you later. We can't get lost if we're too speedy for you," she added laughingly. "We'll meet you at the next campsite up by the bend." "Well, don't eat all the peaches," called Ethel as they started off. But Ruth was not yet satisfied. She had no intention of going to that farm herself. She knew she must in some way contrive to substitute Frida for herself. Before they reached the bank, she stopped short. "Hang it all," she exclaimed, apparently annoyed. "I've got a nail in my shoe." "Shall I go get the hammer?" suggested Marjorie. "No, I'd better go, for if I can't get it out, I'll have to get the sneakers out of our bag." "But, say, this means delay. Could you go for the peaches by yourself?" "All right, certainly." "No, you better not either," decided Ruth, pretending to be very solicitous about Marjorie's welfare. "You'd better get another girl." "Ho, Frida!" Frida appeared in a second, accepting the explanation, and took Ruth's place. The latter returned to the group of scouts, now ready to depart, and made elaborate pretense at fixing an imaginary nail in her shoe. The operation, however, seemed to be quickly performed. In less than 5 minutes, the scouts had pushed off, with now only 4 instead of 5 canoes in the party. Meanwhile, Marjorie and Frida made for the opposite direction, arriving at their destination before the remainder of the party had even started. They tied their canoe securely to a tree trunk and walked towards the farmhouse. "I hope whoever lives there doesn't bite our heads off," observed Marjorie. Looking all around, they saw no one in sight and proceeded towards the front door. "Don't go to the front door, Marge," said Frida, stopping suddenly. "Country people always use their kitchens most of all. Let's go there." Accordingly, they passed around to the rear of the house. Peering through the screen door of the kitchen, they beheld an attractive interior, neat and clean and well kept. At the corner, beside the stove, they distinguished the stout figure of a woman bending over a pan. Marjorie knocked timely. "Come in," called the woman cheerily. Then, turning round, she opened her eyes wide in amazement at the sight of the 2 young girls. "How do you do?" said Marjorie pleasantly, as she and Frida entered the big room. "We belong to the girls who camped last night a little way up the stream, and we want to know whether you will sell us $1 worth of peaches. They look delicious." The woman smiled with pleasure. A workman loves to hear praise of his achievements, and the peach orchard was this lonely woman's one happiness and pride. For the moment she forgot the part she was to play in her sheer delight at the compliment. "Yes, I growed them all myself. Been livin' here nigh on 30 years." She was about to say, "by myself," but caught herself in time and added, "me and my husband. And if I do say it myself, it's a fine crop of peaches I've got. I never have no trouble sellin' 'em." "And do you do all the work yourself?" questioned Frida. "Doesn't your husband help you?" The woman shook her head. "No, he runs the car into Beasley and other towns and sells 'em, but I do all the growin'. He never seemed to have no luck. But sit down a minute, and I'll give you some doughnuts and fresh milk." "Thanks," they said gratefully. "But I almost think we oughtn't to be so far behind the others." "But it will take a while to pick the peaches," interrupted the other, "and you might as well be restin' and refreshin' yourself. Sit down." The girls laughed good-naturedly and seated themselves upon a long wooden box, which was evidently used for kindling. Just as they were handed their refreshments, an old man shuffled into the room. "Jim, these girls want some peaches," said the woman. "Will you go out and pick them a basket?" $1 worth," exclaimed Marjorie, biting into her doughnut. The man nodded his head slowly and then turned round and carefully closed the wooden door and bolted it. "First of all," he drawled, "will you answer me one question? Be either of yees by any chance Marjorie Wilkinson?" Marjorie dropped her doughnut into her lap in amazement. How could this man possibly know her name? But she never thought for a moment of attempting to conceal her identity. So she answered unhesitatingly, "Yes, my name is Marjorie. Why?" The old man squinted one eye and, glorying in the completeness of his disguise, looked into her face. "You know why as good as I do, young lady. That's no use pretendin'." And these words, both girls sprang up instantly. There was something odd about the old man, something uncanny. Both girls shuddered involuntarily, with a common purpose, started for the door, leaving their half-finished doughnuts on the table. But the man held up his hand. He had no intention of allowing them to escape thus easily. "Maybe you think we don't know all about who you are," he said mockingly. Marjorie looked helplessly at the woman. "Is he crazy?" she asked. "No, indeed," replied the other. "He really knows what he's talking about. And you do too, only you won't own up to it." "Frida," said Marjorie in a terrified voice, "we must get out of here immediately." "Not so fast, not so fast," said the old man. "All the doors happen to be locked. But in case you think I mean to harm you, I'll explain. Though I know you're only pretending, like you don't know. Miss, you know better'n I do that you ran away from your pap, and you must know as how he's anxious to get you back, though maybe you're not acquainted with the fact that he's offered $1,000 reward to them as locates you and notifies him accordingly. Therefore, I mean to hold you, and your friend too, to keep you company, until your pap gets my message and shows up to claim you and give me my reward. My wife just had one of them new-fangled arrangements for running water put in the house, and it cost us a pretty penny. The money'll come in right handy. We've got a nice bedroom for you upstairs, so you might as well make yourself to home. Now, is there anything I can do for you?" By this time, Marjorie realized that he was really in earnest, though where he could have heard the strange story appalled her. She stood still, hopeless, in the center of the room, and the two girls, great tears rolled down their cheeks. "It's all a ghastly lie," she cried. "You people are ordinary kidnappers, and that's the meanest kind of criminal there is." She flashed a look of intense hatred at them both. "My father knows all about where I am, and he gave me full permission to go with the scouts. If you don't believe me, why don't you telephone him?" "Easy, easy, my gal," said the old man with a cynical smile on his face. "It's possible, of course, that we might have the wrong Margaret Wilkison, but I guess I'll find that out. $1,000 would lift the mortgage from this here farm." "My name is Marjorie, not Margaret," snapped the girl. "So, you see, you're mistaken after all, and you might as well let us go. You'll never get anything but a jail sentence out of my father. Give me a chance to find that out. Then, if I'm mistaken, I'll give you my word. I'll let you both go." "Well, then, go phone now," challenged Frida. Though she had said nothing thus far, it was not because she was not greatly incensed. Had there been any hope of escape, she would have leapt out at the old man, for she was exceptionally strong. But she realized that it was useless to attempt such a thing. "Yes, go," commanded Marjorie, and she gave the man her telephone number. "Just see what my father says. I'm going over to the Beasleys now. We ain't rich enough to have a telephone over here, so make yourself comfortable while I'm gone. Reckon I'll lock the missus in, too, in case you all get too rambunctious for her." With these words, he unbolted the door and went out, locking it on the outside behind him. Frida's mind instantly flew to the windows, but they were completely covered by a heavy wire screening which was fastened to the window frame on the outside. "I'm sorry, girls," said the woman, her voice softening with pity, "but he really won't hurt you. He only wants the money. You don't know how it feels to be poor all your life, and then see a chance to make a tidy sum, and not put all your powers into getting it. It'll only be a matter of a day or two, and then you can join your party again if you ain't the one we're looking for. And if you are, think how glad your pap will be to see you again. Now, want to come upstairs?" The girls followed the woman half-heartedly up the crooked staircase to the second floor, all the while watching for a chance to escape, but they saw none. The bedroom into which she led them was neat and clean, and the bed linen spotless. Marjorie silently thanked her for that, and sat down upon the chair beside the window. Here there was no wire screening, only netting, and the sash was wide open. The lovely air from the orchard floated in, reminding them what a beautiful day it was outside. Marjorie secretly wished that Ruth were her fellow sufferer, as originally planned, for somehow she felt that Ruth, with her cleverness, could rise superior to almost any contingency. "Well, Frida, I guess we're in for it," she remarked as the door was closed, and the retreating footsteps of the woman could be heard going downstairs again. "And I suppose there's no use getting excited over it, but it certainly is hard luck." "Marge," cried Frida suddenly, in a doleful tone, "suppose this makes us too late for the water meet?" The idea had not occurred to Marjorie. She looked thunderstruck for a moment, but dismissed the thought with her usual optimism. "It simply couldn't, Frida," she reassured the other. "Today's only Friday, and the old sinner will surely find out today that he's mistaken and let us go early tomorrow. It's 2 days' trip. We'll only be a day late, and the meet isn't till Wednesday." "Oh, Frida," she jumped up and threw her arms round her companion, "I'll be so disappointed if I don't have a chance to try for the cup." The woman appeared with their lunch, and the girls found themselves treated like royal guests. They slept in the afternoon, but by 5 o'clock the old man had not appeared, and Marjorie's hopes sank. One day was lost. Chapter 12. The Search. As the scouts pushed off from the shore, they lingered until Marjorie and Frida disappeared around a bend in the stream on their way to the farmhouse. Then, still thinking of the peaches, they went slowly forward. "Let's go slowly and give the girls a chance to catch up," suggested Ethel. "I could eat a peach right now." "So could I," agreed Lily. "Oh, Marge and Frida will soon catch up," reassured Ruth. "They're the two best canoeists we've got." "You're right, Ruth," said Florence Evans. "Really, it hardly seems worthwhile for the rest of us to go into the water meet. Marge will be sure to carry off the prize." "What did I tell you, Lil?" asked Ruth triumphantly. "Well, don't repeat it, or I'm liable to upset the canoe again." She was in quite a good humor now, and could laugh about the episode. "But I do think," she added, "that we all have a good chance to become an expert, as Marjorie is, and we're bum sports. If we just sit back and complain that it isn't fair, it would spoil all her pleasure." "Right you are, Lily," commented Miss Phillips. "I'm beginning to see that it is worthwhile to be a scout after all." "Yes, I'm ashamed of myself," said Ruth humbly, "but I am putting all my energy into the job, and I hope, maybe, I'm improving. A teeny-weeny bit. How about it, Captain?" "You are doing very well, Ruth," she replied with sincerity. The girls paddled on in silence for a time, all the while keeping a sharp lookout behind them for the absent ones. But there were so many bends and turns, and the trees were so thick on either side, that they could scarcely see 200 yards behind them. Suddenly Ruth noticed a little tributary to the right. "Where did that come from, Captain?" she asked. "Not far from the farm, where the girls stopped for the peaches. We might have followed it, but it could have necessitated a portage, so I preferred the longer way entirely by the water." "That's the one Marge and Frida took," cried Ruth with assurance, "and you can mark my words, they're ahead of us right now, and they just thought they'd be smart and beat us." "But they'd have to make portage," objected Ethel, "and with all those peaches—" "Portage means nothing to Frida Hammers, young life," contradicted Ruth. "She's as strong as an ox." Well, if they did, I'll call it mean, said Florence. I'm dying for a peach. Me too, put in Alice. They fell silent again. The creek, as it approached the river, was becoming swifter, and the canoes required more attention. Miss Phillips alone was worried about the missing girls. It did not seem like either Marjorie or Frida to play such a trick. Had Ruth been one of the two, she would hardly have given the matter a thought. But under these circumstances she was afraid that something had happened. By the time 4 o'clock came, they were approaching the locality which the captain had designated for their final night in the open. All the girls looked eagerly for the signs of the canoe or of their missing companions, and hoped at every instant to hear the familiar whistle. But they heard nothing except the sounds of nature, the dip of the paddles, the lapping of the water against the sides of the canoe. They're hiding, I'll bet, exclaimed Ruth, as she pulled in to shore. No, they're not either, said Miss Phillips, who had already landed her canoe. I'm afraid something has happened. I'll go right back, Captain, offered Ruth. Who'll go with us? Thanks, Ruth, said Miss Phillips, but I'm afraid it's too late. Remember, it would mean to paddle upstream, and night is coming on, too. There would be no use of several of us getting lost, as well as the other two. At least they are together. Marjorie's canoe may have sprung another leak. But what shall we do, Captain? Inquired Lily, now becoming alarmed. We'll wait till tomorrow morning, and then I will take one of you and go back. In the meantime, we may as well get to work and make our camp. But who'll cook? Demanded Ruth. The idea of assuming Frida's duties did not particularly appeal to her. We'll have to take turns, answered Miss Phillips. Ruth, you and Lily will prepare supper tonight, and Frances and Alice will get breakfast. I'll appoint others later, for we may be here a good while. Oh, I hope not, said Frances optimistically. Suppose we'd miss the water meet, suggested Ruth in distress. Well, I hope we shan't, but that wouldn't be nearly so tragic as losing two of our girls, said Lily. The tents were soon put up, and a tempting meal was spread before the tired and hungry girls, but it did not prove to be a happy one. A shadow seemed to have fallen upon the group. The lost girls were general favorites, and everyone except Ruth, who pretended to be, was disturbed over their absence. Therefore, no one was sorry when Miss Phillips suggested that they all go to bed early. I should like an early breakfast, cooks, said the captain. Is 5 o'clock too soon? Then Ethel and I will start back for the farmhouse to inquire news of the girls and to search. Frances, you will be in charge, of course, here at the camp. Maintain strict discipline, please. Swimming and canoeing will both be permitted, but no girl is to go out of sight of the camp alone. Both Ethel and her captain found it an entirely different matter to paddle upstream instead of down. Their shoulders ached, and their hands were blistered then. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they finally arrived at the farmhouse. All along the way they had looked for a canoe and listened for the sound of the girls' voices, and had whistled and called, but in vain. Only the echo of their own voices answered their appeals. It was unfortunate that their sneakers made no sound as they walked across the grass, and that Marjorie and Frida at the time happened to be lying on the bed, out of view of the window. Nor did they hear the voices, for their room was at the other end of the house from the kitchen. Their captor saw the visitors approaching and went to the kitchen window. In a soft voice she asked what they wanted. Did you see anything of two girls who came here yesterday to buy some peaches? Asked Miss Phillips. The woman had to think quickly in order to decide upon the best reply to make. In a second, however, she answered, Yes, I sold 'em $1 worth, and they went down yonder and got into their boats again. Did they say anything about playing a joke on us? Yes, they asked me if there was any different way, and I told them about that little branch off in the north. They laughed and said they'd take it and maybe beat you. They ain't lost, are they? They must be, sighed Miss Phillips in extreme distress. She was sincerely alarmed now. Any tramps round here? She inquired anxiously. No, hardly ever. And what there is harmless nothin'. Could have hurt them. Maybe their boat sprang a leak, and they had to stop and get it fixed. And which way did they go? Repeated Miss Phillips. That there way, replied the woman, pointing. They carried the boat down past that there oak tree. You'll find a stream there if you want to follow it. Good luck to you, she concluded, as her visitors turned to go. Thank you, said Miss Phillips, and she and Ethel went in the direction indicated.